I want to check in with you and see like where you're at with interviewing. Have you had a interview yet for the technical writing role?
In the past, I did, it was for like paid mentorship role with Linux Foundation. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, I didn't make it past, of course, I didn't get picked, but um, other than that, I haven't really had anything else since.
Okay. All right, cool. So you have limited experience interviewing, but you did have a semi like positive, it seems, experience the last time you did it. And I believe you're going for like an entry level role, right?
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah, that's the kind of role I'm going for. And the one for First Cell kind of seems like an entry role. I think they wanted someone with like 5+ years, I believe. I don't really remember the exact amount of experience, but they do want someone with experience in that. And
Okay.
so,
So that sound, let me actually, I'm looking up the, I'm looking up the um job description. Is it this one? Whoop, clicked the wrong thing, sorry. I'm gonna throw it into the chat. Is it this job?
realize I was on mute, sorry. Um,
It's okay.
e yes, yes.
Okay, cool. So, let's just, I'm gonna first, like, before we do the interview, because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to ground this in us, like, really trying to understand what Vercel is looking for and make sure that we're talking about this and we're going through this mock interview in a way that is like very reflective of what they're looking for. And I won't have the exact answers or try to figure out the exact questions that they will ask, but what I can do
hmm
is just really base it off of what the job description has, okay?
And for preference, the interview is going to be with the director of docs.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so if I pass that one, I then talk to the docs, the members of the documentation team. So it's they have like stages.
Okay, okay, cool. So looking at this company, I know Vercel overall it's a company that I think does a really good job of marketing and like they seem to have a very strong presence around like DevRel and creating technical content. So I think this is a really great job to work at and to like build these technical writing skills. So shout out to you for getting yourself and putting yourself out there in a way that makes it easy to see them for them to see you as someone that would be able to like do the same things that they're already doing. So I hope that gives you confidence to know that they want you. They're coming to you, so you're in a really good position. Um, so they are looking for someone with experience and they're looking for someone with a strong technical writing background. You will work cross-functionally with different teams, including software engineer, DevOps, product managers to ensure that our dev tooling workflows and documentation are highest quality. So what that automatically signals to me is that I want to take notes somewhere. Sorry. My mind um is it new dot docs or is it docs? It's docs new.
Docs.new, I think.
My dyslexia loves to show up in very unique ways. Um, okay, cool. So, never. So I'm gonna share this with you. Um, and we're going to just, oh, someone else is here. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna share this doc with you so that way you can have it after the fact. But what I'm pulling out here from this job application, the first thing I see is that cross-functional is going to be really important. So to me, that's what stands out is, can you work with other people from different domains? And the example of this is, um, I'm so used to using Notion. I don't know how to, okay, whatever. So this is the example from the job application that is leaning, is telling me that this is going to be important and they're probably going to ask questions on this. Also, hey Eric, thanks for joining. We're just going through and doing some grounding exercises before we jump into the actual mock interview that we'll be doing today. Um, Feel free to, if you have any questions, throw them into the chat or come off mute, whichever one is easier. We're just here to hang out today and make sure people know how to feel comfortable in their next interview. Um, cool. So to me, like that's a really big priority. Also, they want someone with experience, so they're gonna probably be asking you um about different things that you wrote and how do you think about things. Um, and and so like that's another thing that is standing out to me from this job post. And then like they wanna, when you're going into like that first interview, because what you're doing is what they call a hiring manager screen. So the hiring manager is gonna most likely, it's either the recruiter or the hiring manager that's gonna be the first person to talk to you in the interview process. And what they're looking for is, do you have the key skills that they need to get this job done and make sure that this will be the right environment for you. So another thing to really look at to prepare for an interview is to look at what is going on in the like what you'll do section of a job application or a job application. Um, so it's being able to think like a user that's getting to understand the platform. So create documentation about their tools and API library, maintain things. Okay, so this is seems to be very standard when it comes to like technical writer. I don't see anything in this like to-do list that stands out to me as like, oh, you need to know this. So one thing that stands out to me about like what they're looking for when they talk about requirements, and we can list this out here,
So my question
is you want to have at least like 5 years of experience being a technical writer or a related role, or you have a proven track record of writing impactful documentation. Okay, so that is going to be like for you the thing that you want to really like lean into is like when you give your answers, you want to ground it in the fact that you have like you've written things that are impactful that have helped people, especially anything related to um anything close to what Vercel uses, right? So thinking about TypeScript, JavaScript, React, Vue, um, Git workflows. So, and that is something that would be good. Communication again, see it's coming up. I said it before, just looking at the start of the job description, that collaboration and working with cross domains is going to be important. Learning quickly, and you're able to put the reader first. You understand and apply various content types in your writing. Okay. And then it starts talking about the benefits and all the cool stuff. Okay, this looks like a really good job. This pay looks solid. So I'm really excited for you. So before we jump into the actual mock interview where I asked you a couple questions, I wanted to see if you had any questions about like how I broke down this job description, or if you had any other thoughts about it.
As far as like breaking down the job description, um, gosh, what question? Um, when it comes to breaking that down and formulating my responses based on that, do you recommend like focusing on the bullet points where where you can like talk about where you can talk about the most? Like I know, I can learn things pretty quickly. Um, I have maintained documentation before and like um I have um created used well used different forms of content to create documentation and create impactful things. Um but as far as like with like TypeScript and like all that, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't had much experience with that. So do you recommend focusing mostly on the strengths? I hope I'm making sense.
No, 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 you're making a lot of sense because it's like how do you position yourself? Like how do you find like your strengths going into this interview? So, uh, um, how do you find your strengths going into this interview? So I think from like just my interactions with you on Twitter, I think where you're really strong is that you have a proven track record of like impactful documentation. I don't remember what it was I saw of yours first. Uh, I think it was something on Dev too. Are do you post content on Dev too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like I saw that you posted some, I can't remember the article, but I think if you can talk about like your experience of the content you're already putting out there because they already want you. So I don't think you need to really focus on this part. Like that's not where you need to worry about. What you want to focus on is your strength, which is like you have a record of creating impactful documentation. What you want to do is just find the docs that you wrote that falls in line with what they're looking for, right? So like this. So what you would want to do is just like, what technical documentation do you have that's very similar to the type of content that Vercel puts out? So that's going to be like where you are going to find your strength. So you want to focus on that. You want to focus on the other thing is like you've done a lot of community work and you've been a part of a lot of different cohorts where you got to work with different people because this role is going to require you to work with different domains like developers, DevOps, product. You want to lean into any experience you have doing this. So if you can talk about how whether you're writing content for like open source or what is it called? Open sauce? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, open source, yeah.
Yeah, so I would focus on any experience you have with that because then you're able to talk about examples of when you were able to work with like engineers, DevOps, PMs, or people playing those roles. Um, so you really want to double down on that. I'm trying to think of what else you're um and you said you already have experience with writing and maintaining, so you're not coming in at zero. Um, so So I think that's another thing that's gonna like make you stand out as far as like your strengths. I think the other thing, shoot, I just had it. Um, oh, so when I'm hiring someone who I know like I want them to level up quickly in this role, because like I can see that they have the core skills needed to do the job. I just need them to like maybe learn a little bit more about the domain or the product. I want to know like how do you learn quickly? And you don't need to have um everything like fleshed out like the perfect answers right now, but I do think that as far as like your strengths, these are going to be like how you start to find them, and you can like lean on them that way. Is this making sense?
Yes, yes.
And if it doesn't, feel free to tell me that too, because because I know this one is tricky, especially when you haven't had that like maybe like one-to-one title or something like that, or it's hard to.
Yeah. Um, as far as like a stable technical writing role, I never really had that. It's mostly been open source
Mm-hmm.
and like blogging that has been my experience.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that your strength is going to be um like how we've been highlighting it here, finding the things that you've already done in different settings and translating it to like how you would use it here. Because what you're trying to do is you show them that you have these skills in other places, and through your answers you tie the dots so that um they can see how you would show up in the workplace. Okay? So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think this is a good grounding before we jump into the mock interview where we go into like question mode. I wanted to see if you had any other questions for me before we got started. And if you
Um,
mm-hmm,
through my as I reflect on how I respond to interview questions, I do tend to like give a lot of detail, and through the interview guide that Vercel sent me, they do want detail. How do I give detail but without like going overboard and sounding as if I'm babbling?
that's a good question. Um So there's a couple of different methods that you can use to give details in a or tell stories in a way that makes a lot of sense to the listener. I think um I think the way that it makes the most sense is to use something called the STAR method. So you want to what STAR method?
Yeah,
So
I already
mhm.
do use the star method, but I still find myself like going overboard.
Yeah, so I think I think you just get better at practice. So to the way that I do it is I define the problem. I'm like, so trying to think of a question that I get asked during interviews. Like as an engineering manager, how do you handle conflict? I will state some of the processes that I use. Then I give an example. I'll ground it in like, hey, there was this one time that we had personality clashes and that created this impact. So you quickly one liner try to get the problem statement. You talk about the impact, the negative impact that have, like for this example, the negative impact. And then you want to spend most of your time explaining the steps that you took to solve it. And you should say, like, okay, to solve that negative conflict, I met with these two people. I got their both sides and understanding. I found a way to mend that connection in a way that made the most sense for the impact that was experienced. And then this was the once things were fixed, this was now the improved impact. So if you can try to think about talking about your stories that way, I think that would be helpful. even if you have to take your time to like write it down, if you can fit it on um like an index card. I don't know if people still have index cards because I don't have them, but you should be able to fit your story on one side of an index card. And like that's a good judge of like how fast you could say it. I would also, if you have sticky notes, you would have like a problem sticky note. Write that down. Your problem should fit on one sticky note. And you could do that for the impact, the solution. You can do it for the resolution. So that is a trick that you can use to start to refine and like cut down. Another really good trick that's like more modern, you should be able to answer these questions in a TikTok video. So think 60 minutes or less to ground them into what's going on. That could also be a good way to practice. And you don't have to post the actual content, but those are ways that you can just start to really get used to condensing and not going overboard. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Because I tend to have that problem too. So those are just things that I've tried there. But yeah, as you're exploring, keep me up to date with that, and we can definitely brainstorm different ways we can go about that. All right. So, are you ready to go for our interview? Um, our mock interview session now?
Yeah, yeah, I am.
Okay, cool. So, um, would you, so before I get started, sometimes I'll go through and ask people to introduce themselves. Um, but I know sometimes people don't struggle with that. So I wanted to know if you wanted to start off with if you wanted to start off with introductions, or did you want to just jump into the type of questions that I think they would ask in this interview?
I wouldn't mind introducing myself.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and set the scene. You are getting ready to talk to, I think you said the director of docs at
Yeah.
at Bercel, and it's me.
Hmm.
So it's someone, it's a familiar face. You're super excited. I'm excited because I found you on Twitter, and my team found you on Twitter, and we're excited to talk about you. You're the star of the show. Um, and that's reducing your anxiety because you know you've already done the work to get into this space, and now it's just a conversation. So we're going to go ahead and kick off this interview. I'm going to do it just the same way I run interviews that like I do at my 9 to 5. So welcome. Thank you for joining. My name is Valerie. I'm a hiring manager at this really cool company called Vercel, and excited to chat with you. I'm going to tell you what to expect from this interview by in hopes that I help reduce some of your stress. So we're going to go ahead and kick off with introductions, and then from there, I will go ahead and start to ask a little bit of questions about um, how you think about work and what it could look like to work for you to work at Vercel. And at the end of the interview, I'll give you some feedback as well as answer any questions that you may have. All right, cool. So my name is Valerie. Been a hiring manager for a minute. Got into technical writing pretty recently, but that's a little bit about me. Really enjoy working at this company because of the people I get to work with and the content that I get to create. I would love to learn a little bit more about you. If you can, tell me about yourself before we jump into these questions.
Um, Hi, I'm Christine. Nice to meet you, Valerie. I have been a technical writer for about a year now. I frequently write articles at Free Code Camp. I also dabble in open source documentation and I decided to apply for the technical writing role at your company because I heard through a colleague that you really take pride in creating high quality documentation and ensure that it can be understood by people from all backgrounds, whether someone's starting their career as a developer or someone who's like starting to use Vercel for the first time. And I look forward to using my skills to help continue that mission.
Awesome. Love that. And I love the fact that you are aware of the company, and you see our content and you're also excited to work here. I can't wait to learn a little bit more about you. Um, so the first question I have for you is I would love to know what experience you have with front-end tools. Can you describe your experience working with front-end tools such as like TypeScript, React, Nux, or Vercel? If you have, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Um, I do, I have been using Vercel for my personal projects for a couple of months now. Um, as far as like other tools that I use honestly Vercel is the front end tool that I've mainly been using for my projects, and yeah,
Okay, cool.
that's mhm.
Keep going. Sorry if I interrupted. Keep going if you were still finishing your thought.
No, I finished my thought there.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So, jumping into the next question, have you ever used anything like, actually, let's jump into this question. Can you walk me through your thought process for developing and updating technical documentation? Really would love to know how do you ensure that it meets the reader's needs and you're thinking about all types of users and make sure that when they go through the docs that they have a better experience.
Oh, great question. I personally try to gain firsthand experience with the product, and then when I'm comfortable with it, I go to the documentation and look for parts that need updating. And if I find that, I read through it and ask myself, okay, um, what are some parts that need more detail or what feature has not been talked about? And from there, I write a rough draft, um, put it via Markdown or whatever language the project is using, and send it via a pull request and work with the maintainers to improve it. And then it gets updated. Case in point, I was looking at open source documentation just on a whim, and I noticed that they were missing information about their PR velocity tool. It's something that I personally have been curious about as a user. So I thought to myself, okay, if I don't know what that is, I can only imagine what other users feel, especially those who are using the product for the first time. So I raised that as an issue on their GitHub's repository, got the approval from the maintainers, and wrote a brief explainer feature on what it is and how it works with the open source database. And it got merged, and from there, I think it um, brought more people into the product. Like I think 50 to 60%. Don't remember the exact metrics with that. So yeah, that's my process.
I think that's a great example. Um, one follow-up question I had for this one was, sorry, I'm still taking notes. So one question I had about this is you shared that you were able to go through and read the documentation and you found that it was missing a couple of things here and there. How did you fill in that gap? Like, how did you find out what um, the solution were for the things that you didn't know before writing the documentation?
Pure curiosity, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. I was just reading and just thought to myself, hey, wait a minute, this isn't mentioned in there. Why? And then I decided to say, okay, if I don't understand it, then I can only imagine how other users feel. So I asked a couple of people who use OpenSoft if they understand what PR velocity is, and they pretty much said, "Hey, you're right. I don't know what that is either." So from there, I um, raised the issue and created that update.
Okay, and how did you find out what that term PR velocity actually mean?
I interacted with the maintainer about it. Um, I we have a pretty close relationship, so I sent him a DM on the community's Discord server and said, "Hey, I'm trying to write an explainer page on what PR velocity is, but I kind of have like a very surface level understanding of it. Can you help me like elaborate on it?" And he pretty much gave the details that I needed, and from that, I wrote the explainer guide.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, so okay, I think that's a really good example, and a good story that you told. Um, I want to jump into another question. Um, let's see. I think I want to ask the question of, can you tell me about a time when you had to collaborate closely with a cross-functional team member? And this could be like working with a software engineer, a product manager, or someone who works in QA or DevOps. How were you able to communicate and efficiently collaborate with them throughout that process?
Okay. Um, at OpenSauce, there was someone who raised an issue about how the intro course was not inclusive to people who don't speak English. You can say that he is like really big on localization and whatnot. So we both came up with a plan to um, translate the intro course into French. So what I did was um, wrote certain phrases in French with the help of Google Translate because my proficiency in the language is um, not too great. So from there, I would show him the parts that I did, and then he would read through them and improve. And from there, we also created a tool, not a toolbar, but a navigation bar where users can switch from English to um, French. And then we showed it to the maintainer of the um, intro repo, and she went through it and kind of made sure that it had some sort of resemblance to the English version. She doesn't know French, but she mostly focused on um the way the content was structured just to ensure that it was similar. And from there, we got it merged and it brought in a lot of French speakers, like 40 to actually no 50 to 60% of them. So that's how I work with other people in different departments.
Okay, I think that's a great example, and I love the fact that you were able to ground that in the impact, and we were able to see how that worked really took us to the next level. Um, so I the last question I have for you before we jump into the feedback part of this is I would love to know if you could describe a situation where you had to quickly adapt to a new domain or new technology and how you were able to approach learning quickly and getting ready to provide and create the documentation that other people would start to use to navigate the space.
Ooh, that's a very interesting one. So, um, at Open Source, the team had recently switched their documentation from Doxify, not documentation, but framework from Doxify to Docusaurus. So I basically went to the Docusource site just to see how they um, uh, do things like creating like writing tips or creating lists and verbs and all that. And it took me about like a week to get down. So from that, I learned it pretty quickly and started creating effective documentation based on um, Docusaurus. So yeah.
All right, awesome. Um, so that was the last question I had for you. I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the feedback side of this. And just so you know, I am taking notes on this, and it includes like the questions that were asked and some details about the answers that you gave. And I'm also gonna add like the feedback that we go through. Um, sorry, let me
Do you need my email so you could share the doc
Yes,
with me?
yes. I'm sorry, I meant to ask you this before. And also, Joyo, or Joseph, I know you have joined. Just wanted to say welcome. Thank you for joining. Feel free to come off mute whenever, or stay on mute. It's totally fine, either one. Just wanted to give you some acknowledgement and saying thanks for hanging out. Um, we just finished wrapping up our mock interview, and so now we're going back into the feedback loop for this. Um, so I think overall, um, overall you did a really good job um with getting the uh telling your story. There are just a couple of things that I would want you to like work on and think about because just because this role is looking for someone with experience and they want someone who can jump in early. So I think the one thing I would um, suggest here is to um, let's see. The one thing I would suggest here is when we started off with the when we started off with the what is it called? When we started off talking about the experience and the different tools that you worked with, I thought there was a lot lacking here. I think I called out, have you worked with TypeScript, Next.js, or Vercel? And you did explain that you mostly worked with Vercel, but I didn't really get any understanding of your experience. So I think a way to add some, like, let your strengths really shine for um this first question is to just really focus in on an example of where you were able to work with the project or like add some technical writing support to a project. So you could say like, yeah, you worked with Brazil, and you helped like manage a front end like framework or front end project, where like you were able to help like maybe transition from like one framework to Nux, or maybe the team started working with Vercel. And I think that would have been a great way to explain like you have been exposed to those different technologies. Um, and just like show the impact of how your support was able to help that transition. Does that make sense?
Mostly doing personal to like the personal projects that I did, and there's an open source project that I made where our cell is used, but I feel like that particular surface, like in the nitty-gritty, like like for example, like, for my for the project I mentioned, controversial, I mostly use it to like read ones that gets they don't like working with her, so and that makes sense.
Yeah, so one thing that you could do is if you don't feel like um you don't feel like you have an like you don't feel that confident in your skill set, or maybe you don't have that much exposure to a framework or anything that's listed, if you have experience with something similar, like maybe you haven't worked that much with Next.js, but maybe you've worked with something different, or maybe you haven't worked that closely with TypeScript, but you know JavaScript and you know React, right? So you can use similar frameworks if it's not the one that's given. And I think for this one, for your to show your impact, if you focus it on, let's see, what is it? Like if you focus it on like just describing what you have done in the project, like describe your contributions and how it just like how you leverage this tool um for like the to get to your end goal. And I think that will help ground us and give you a little bit more to talk about. Like even with what you just shared with even with what you just shared with the work that you've done with open source, I think that's great. If you could just like tie that in, or how you use it to deploy your different projects. You can say like, yeah, Vercel is something that I use to help me deploy my projects, and to it makes the deploy process a lot easier, meaning that I can get my content or my products out to production faster. So that could, yeah, yeah. Um, So I think it's just more so it's like, what is your exposure to something like this? Because I could see them asking you a question like that, or just asking you, how do you work with technology, or any like tech or coding environment? And so what they're really looking for is like, hey, do you know enough to navigate around this? What is your experience? What is your exposure to it? And what impact or how have you moved your projects forward by using these skills? If that makes sense.
Kind of got me thinking of something.
Mm.
I did mention how Links have the project very calming with a couple of colleagues. How Vercel is used to like deploy requests. Um, it makes it easier to for me to determine if a certain contribution um meets the standards of um PR of a contribution. I tend to like look through it first, and then if I feel that contributor has followed the guidelines, I then deploy the PR for approval. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like you're able to create an environment that lets you walk through the code and let you know all is actually good or let you test the code before approving.
Yeah, I mean that's the next thing I could go for.
I think that's a perfect example. If you would have got that, I would have gave you like a 5-star rating. But that's a really good way to ground yourself in anything like that. And I think even with giving you that feedback, you're able to say like, oh, okay, this is how they want to understand what's going on. And you were able to then take it and say like, okay, so here's an example of where I was able to do this thing. And to me, as a hiring manager, I hire like junior people and people more senior than me, and I can instantly tell if someone has actually done what they're saying or if they just read about it by the example that they gave. This example to me is a key example of someone like, oh, you really understand the core concept of this tool. You understand like how it's really helpful to and impacts teams to do more work with less time. So to me, I think that's a really solid answer. Okay.
Yeah, I think after what you said, I thought to myself, okay, I don't necessarily have to be
Mm-hmm.
like go on a technical, like detailed explanation. I can just merely take Vercel and kind of apply it to the way that I've experienced it.
Yeah,
Kind of
and
cured my,
mm-hmm.
it kind of cured my imposter
Yeah.
syndrome a little bit.
Well, look at that. I love that. I'm so happy for you. And yeah, as you're going through the interview process, uh, one thing you want to do is always ground yourself in the role that you're going to be in. If they are asking you to be in like a developer or senior developer when it is a technical writing role, that's a bad company. That's when you run. But you always, when you're answering these questions, you want to show up like a technical writer would in these spaces. And I think the example you gave here is a great way to say, like, as a technical writer, I want to understand the impact of these tools and how do I learn about these tools. And here is an example where I immediately saw the impact. And I think that's great because you could then take that back to write about it and things like that. Okay. Um, Jumping into the next question, I thought you what question was this? I thought you did a really good job about like explaining how you go through and your process with creating technical documentation. But the thing that I really wish you would have like did a deep dive into a little bit more because I know what they'll try to pull from with this question is when you don't know something, how do you find that information? Because to me, technical writers are the people who are connecting the dots. And so that's why I asked that follow-up question. How did you find that missing information? So if you could add that into just like the way that you told this story. I thought it was really good, really spot on. You told me from the beginning to the end of how you were able to identify issues, get up to speed, and get it into production as quickly as possible. But just adding in that little nugget of how did you find that missing information would be key. And I think the other thing to be mindful of is that Vercel in their job description kept talking about understanding it from like the user's standpoint and thinking of like user zero. So I think you did do a good job of like highlighting how even asking other people, they did not know. So you knew that needed to be defined. But if you play up on that a little bit more, you're going to stand out as someone who is thinking about user zero. Okay?
Good point, good point. I guess the part, I guess me mentioning like I use the product myself, I didn't have any idea. It kind of does make me a little bit biased, but I also kind of like mention that because I'm a believer in like when it comes to creating documentation, it it is important to be the user as well. That way, if you have a first-hand experience, you can kind of like have an easier time of updating the tutorial or blogging about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think saying that you are a user is good. And I think you did you kind of like indirectly highlighted that this was just something that even core users didn't know, but you didn't call it out explicitly. And so I think something that would just make it a little bit stronger is calling it out explicitly, saying like if I didn't know it and then I talked to other people that didn't know it, I want to build this documentation for people who are just starting out and you don't want them to get frustrated. So adding in a line like that, is going, yeah, see? And then that, yeah, the hiring manager is going to be blown away, okay? Like as soon as you start saying things like that, that's when it's going to like really stand, you'll really stand out. But you told us like it was in that story, so you already have those pieces. It's just how do you present that to the hiring manager, okay?
Got it. Like being director, so we are kind of we let them make that conclusion, be direct. Okay, I see.
Yeah. So I think about user zero, that's how they talk about it. Okay. So that was my feedback, but I think that was like one of your strongest answers. You had all the pieces. It's just about polishing it up. So that was, let me see if I had any other feedback for this one. Um yeah, it was just about cleaning up. Um oh, and I think for this one, I don't think I understood the impact.
Yeah, I kind of had to like guess the estimate why as far as like percentage and metrics because she was tracking the metric, tracking the impact for open source documentation as far as like numbers is concerned is not easily done or and that information is not like readily available and I think that's an ongoing like conversation in the open source community. So I kind of had to like make it up.
Yeah.
I don't want to lie, but I don't want to come off as like someone who doesn't think either. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, and I think that's strong because I did notice you started to do impact, and I think people naturally are a little bit biased when people say like 50% or like 40%. I think a way to get around that is that you can say that you made impact by showing that there was an increase of people uh using this terminology in the Discord. Or you can say like there was an increase of people leveraging the tool or referencing the documentation. So that way you don't have to like lean on the numbers. You could just say there was an increase. Um, and if they ask for clarity, you can tell them a range, but you can say like you don't feel confident in like put, like the numbers because you're still the team is still figuring out the best way to track that. So that's how you can handle that is just say increase or decrease.
I see. So saying if I don't know the exact metrics, I could just say the team is still trying to figure the.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like concerned if they do see that it's gonna be like, oh, you never know what she's talking about. You don't want to work with someone that doesn't know what it's
No,
inside.
I
That's
think
it's fine.
I think it's fine. It's open source work. It's not like it's at a company where there is a push for like revenue or anything like that. So I think it's fine if they start to drill in on numbers, you could tell them how you would like to track it or what you would do to implement that, but just say like it's not currently implemented. And so that's how you get around it. Um, so because that's a so if they do start to ask a lot of questions, what they want to know is does this person understand how to find this information or how to track this stuff, even if they don't have the answers themselves or if they don't have the numbers themselves. So you can clear those the thoughts that they have or the concerns that they have by saying, I don't have the numbers right now, but this is the steps I would do to check it. And that will alleviate that issue.
Well, well, I guess as far as like if I have stuff to contract info, I definitely like to would go to the project's Twitter page and see the analytics on how many people actually viewed the um, tweet or check the amount of reposts that I have like the reviews that users have shared their repost. Um, I think that's what I would do.
Yeah, I would just review what other technical writers have said about metrics and like use that as like your baseline and then you can get more creative on top of that. Because I actually don't know what metrics are used in technical writing.
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation in the technical writing community, and there hasn't been like this like standard with that.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Jumping into the next question, I think you did a good job of being able to like um to explain a time that you worked with like the founder of uh open source. The thing that I did note down is that I didn't get a good understand. No, no, no. This wasn't the one you worked with the founder. This was the one with the localization. And I think you did a good job of like grounding me in the project and like the problem that you were solving, but the roles that everyone played was not clear. So I think in this example, what you could have done to like improve this was to say like, hey, someone raised a product concern. So that could translate to like, oh, this person was acting as a PM. Um, about the lack of localization in one of the courses. So you worked with your PM person to create a tool that like improved that, and so you saw 40 to 50% of increase of French speakers take the course. Um,
In this case, like an increase. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and then I think that was yeah, I think you did a good job to ground us in the problem and the impact and like if you expand on like what role everyone played. I wasn't clear on what role you played. Were you like acting as a developer or technical writer? That uh-huh.
Technical writer in fact is in that position. I'm sorry for not clarifying that. Like I thought like creating the translating the course kind of like gave that indicator when that actually written
Okay.
thing that I'm a technical writer for that.
Yeah, that could just be like me, again, not that used to running technical writing interviews, but that was one thing that's stood out to me. It was I was unclear around that. Um and then I think going into more details about like how your process in this project would also be key.
Okay. Interestingly enough, I wrote a blog post on that for a tutorial on new open source contributors and collaborate with other people on their requests.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I should like reference that and like say, hey, I wrote a blog post on it to like my follow-up emails to learn more.
Yeah, so what I would say is I wouldn't maybe you can suggest like to follow up with the blog post. I would kind of stay away from that. But what I you definitely want to reference any of the writing that you've done about this, and I think this would be a great example of when to do that because that's what I was I this question is going to be more focused on how did you work with other people to solve the problem as a technical writer? So the more detail you can go into that is the more you'll be able to solidify that you're perfect for this role. Okay?
Yeah, I'll definitely read through that blog post and see what I can take.
Yeah. And then the last question I asked was about like how you learned quickly. That was the the overall like thing that we were trying to gauge. And I thought like your to me this was the first question that you answered outside of the first one that made me feel like oh this person might be more junior than expected just because of how like brief um no wait actually no no it didn't. I lied. I think the feedback I had about being brief was just your first one. This one was actually a good example of like how you are able to quickly like leverage because I think you said you only spent a week about going through understanding how to use the new tool. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think it was a really good example of how you were able to uh adapt quickly and just find like quick wins to like get things going. I think there is definitely ways that you can um improve or just like polish this. Um I think you if you could talk on like what parts of the documentation or like how you are able to validate the direction you were going is the right direction, I think that would really show off, like, show to them how you troubleshoot and how you kind of like debug technical writing. And I think that is going to be key in this question. Um, but overall, I think that this was strong. I would just say like just my only feedback is more details on how you do like debugging.
Oh, interesting point. You just kind of made me think of another scenario. I don't know if you've seen me talk about pieces a lot.
Mm-hmm.
but I was approached to write for their blog, and I wanted to like get a first-hand experience um with the tool before I go in there and write my piece, because they require like code snippets and like to use the tool for that. So I learned, so I downloaded the OS and the corresponding web and VS Code extensions, and I tinkered around with it for about a week. Then I wrote my blog post, then I wrote my article for their blog. I went to their documentation, um, raised a product issue about, well, not necessarily raised an issue, but there was an issue there about, like they needed help with the recalls, like validating yards and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and need that confirmation that like counts as a story of like learning the tool quickly and adapting to it.
Yeah, that I think that would be a great example, and that might be a little bit stronger than the one that you use here, which I still think it's good, but definitely this one makes you sound a little bit more senior. So I would actually switch to that example and polish it up so it's still like succinct and clear, like we talked about. But again, focus on how you got through the debugging to find your solution and get that out there and talk about that impact. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Overall, there was a couple of like gotcha points that we had in the interview, and I think just for your first try, me personally as a hiring manager, I would be on the fence. I wouldn't be a no, but I wouldn't be a yes. I would definitely want to see what other people have said in the interview process and things like that, or I would definitely want to see like how you would do on the next stages of the interview to have a really solid decision. But I think with the feedback and as we're starting to talk through your impact and your work, I definitely am now leaning more towards a yes moving you forward for the interview process than a no. So that just tells you it's not so much about are you skilled enough or are you qualified enough to get past the interview? It's just more about practicing talking about your work and understanding like the types of questions that people could ask you so that you feel more confident about going into this interview process and being able to show up in a way that makes you really just like stand out. So, um yeah, that wraps up the feedback and the overall like assessment, not assessment, but like loop that we did for this one. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and I want to see if you have any questions. And for the folks who are here with us still, feel free to like jump off either jump in the chat or come off mute to give your feedback too if you have anything that you wanted to share. I meant to say that earlier. Sorry, I just remembered.
It's okay. First things first, I DM'd you my email so you could share the doc, and I noticed that it says untitled, so I think adding a title to it would kind of help.
Yes. Okay, cool. I'm just getting to messages and I'm getting that over to you now.
I don't have much to contribute, but I can tell from spectating that this was a helpful, it appeared really helpful on my developing background. So a lot of the words went right over my head, but this was even helpful for me in terms of understanding how to leverage your experience to the best of your ability. So this was pretty cool.
Oh, look at that. Yeah. I'm happy that it's been helpful. I think my highlight from this is we help reduce some imposter syndrome. So to me, win-win. There's nothing more we could do here.
Yeah, because I've always like froze whenever I hear, have you had experience with this tool? And I'm like, yeah, but it's not in a way that a more like technical person has it, and then you kind of make me think, okay, you don't necessarily have to be deeply technical, just talking about it in the context in a way that you can, or the experience that you have, it is enough. You just have to like convey it as clearly as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just remember, because I think the big thing that I see as downfalls or missteps that people take in the interview is they do not position themselves in the role that they're interviewing for. They'll try to think like a manager or do this or do that. It's okay for you to come at this as a technical writer because that's the role that you're going for. So um, lean in on that and just try to explain everything from that vantage point, and I think you'll do really great.
Yep, and this is something that I'll definitely like look into again for my interview with the head of talent at Clerks. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Um, awesome. So, if no one has any other questions, we can go ahead and start to wrap up for today.
I do have questions, like, but it's mostly about like the type of questions I should ask after the interview.
That is a okay. So I have lots of things to say about the questions that people ask at the end of the interviews. Um, So for me, when I run interviews, I do not make the questions that people ask like a part of the interview. Like if you ask me what is it really like to work here, I'm not going to add that to the debrief and make that a part of what we're um like measuring you against. So I try to tell people, I know not everyone does that, so I try to tell people to ask questions that are going to validate if this space is a good space for you, but also ask questions that make them understand that you're interested in this role. So one of my really good double-sided sword type questions for this is just ask the person what is the biggest problem that they're trying to solve right now, and keep it open ended. And if they ask like, "Oh, what type of problem?" you can say anything. You can say like work or the product or the business or per like process. And that'll tell you more about what's really going on at the company and what different levels care about. So that is my default question that I ask every person that I interview because the recruiters will care about one thing, the hiring managers will care about another thing, and the developers will care about something else. So it gives you a good overview of the company. And then if they start to say like you hear a lot of people say process or communication, that's going to be like a yellow red flag to me like I'm jumping into this, but it may not be the best environment. Or if they start talking about the product, you'll get a better sense of some of the things that you might have to work on. And if they do bring up things that are like product related or things that are close that you would possibly work on, your instant response would be like, "Oh, I am now trying to jump into like brainstorming. I can think of so many things that I want to do. I'm so excited. I can't wait to get off of this call so I can start Googling possible solutions." And that to them just signals like this person is excited, they're ready to work, they're thinking about things. Um, Whether you actually are or not is not important. I've done that in all of my interviews that I've done. And when I got in hired, people have referenced the fact that I was ready to like brainstorm and wanted to just start solving things in the interview. So I think that's a good way to have that space. And I think the other thing is a good question is like what does success look like for the first like 30, 60, 90 days at the job so you get a better understanding of what you should be focusing on when you get in. And then I always try to end my interviews with, hey, we had this set time. Is there anything that you are still on the fence about my skill set or any of the answers I gave that I can answer now before we end today? So that way, if they do have something that they're unsure about, they'll ask it. A lot of the times, in my experience, I've had people say no. Um, and I know it's probably because I've done really bad on the interview and it doesn't make any sense to ask any follow-ups, or it is just like I've done really well. So never take no as like it's the end of the world. It could actually be a really good thing for that question. Um, but yeah, those are my three suggestions. If you look on Twitter, people have like really good threads about this or blog posts or like YouTube videos, but those are my three.
Oh, nice. Okay. So it's basically, the question is, let me try to reiterate it as possible. You basically suggest to ask, like, what is the current problem that you're facing? And leave it open-ended and then kind of just, if they give a response to it, just say, hey, oh, that's interesting. I'm so excited to like get off and like Google some possibilities that it
Mhm.
can help, that I can think of to help solve them and whatnot. And then, like, I also do like the other question too, like, have I answered like your questions effectively? If there is there anything that you have concerns about that need to be addressed? And like you said, some say no, I've gotten enough. Only one person had like said, I'm gonna be honest, I'm concerned about your lack of experience in like security and well, I didn't get that particular writing role because of that, like I predicted. So there's that in my one. So there's that. I think another question that came to my head, I don't know if you're like comfortable answering, but how do you deal with like, okay, what's your salary? Like, what salary do you, what's your desired salary? Because I always like go clench up at the question and kind of just say one on the fly.
Yeah, just say so if it's earlier through the interview process, just say like, you could I usually tell people um like I'm open to the salary range if they can share it or if it's posted somewhere and just say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't remember if I saw the salary range of the job application or if you shared that with me." And I would just ask them to share it again if they have it. And if they tell me the salary range, I'm like, "Oh, that's a good salary range." I would know more so about where I believe I would fit in the salary range once I get towards the end of the interview process and I just understand the expectations a little bit more. And so that gets you away from it without totally rejecting it. You want to make sure though that the bottom salary range and the upper salary range is something that you're okay with. For most interviews, you're going to be placed in the middle of that. Just like that's the gauge that I've seen at most companies. So you don't want to say anything right off the back, but if you can agree to the salary range, that's enough signal for them to like say yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tricky question. And I think it's illegal in some states.
Oh, really? Which ones?
California.
Dang it.
I know. But it doesn't matter. Like most people don't know employment law, so they don't even know that most of them don't know that they're breaking the law. And most of the things that people do during the interview process is illegal and they just don't know it. So it doesn't really matter, you know?
Uh,
Yeah, I said that I'm just like, wow, that sucks. Why am I being a Debbie Downer? But whatever.
it's okay. It's all right. It's making me more aware of what to say. If I ever go to California and apply for a role, I can just pretty much say, that's kind of illegal to ask me that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's a good question. That has helped me before. I still have had recruiters sometime like drill me to give an actual salary, and the times that I've taken those jobs, I've highly regretted it. So now to me, that is like a red flag up front.
Hmm, taking note of that.
Yeah. But yeah, do you have any other questions?
No. So for the salary question, just pretty much say I would like to go through like the other processes of the interview because there are stages.
Mm-hmm.
So once I get through that, then I'll share my answer. So I'll definitely use that.
Yeah, that'll be good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's it. But yeah, I'm really excited that we were able to get through this mock interview. I'm gonna try to throw some extra questions in there that I have like drafted up for technical writers at the bottom of your doc. So as you're going through and practicing, you have different variations of some of the same questions. But yeah, if you need anything, I know your interview, I think you said the interview is Monday, right?
July 2nd.
July 2nd. Okay, so you have some time. So if you want to sing again and just like do a one-on-one thing, I can like DM you my calendar link. So we can definitely go through that. Okay?
Oh, sure, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for hanging out. This is really cool. I do want to open up the floor for questions. Oh, we already have a question. Eric, go ahead.
Hi. Not particularly a question, just it was nice to hang out. Thanks for doing this. I really got some practical tips that will help. And Christine, well done and all the best with your interview. Hope you come back to share good news. And yeah, just thought to say hi before I run along. This has been nice.
Yeah,
Thank you, Eric.
yeah, thank you for joining. I'm glad it was helpful. I think whenever we have a larger group, I'm gonna get more volunteers to actually run the mock interviews in like breakout rooms, so that way more people can go through the interview process at a time. So
Yeah, and I encourage you to like do it for like not just developer roles because I have seen like communities offer mock interviews, but it seems to be geared toward like software engineers and not someone like technical writers or quality assurance or product managers. So for those roles, interview prep is kind of just like you're kind of like on your own, you're kind of left to the wind. So for so I do recommend like doing different types of tech roles, not just developers.
yeah, that's been our goal. I think our flyer is the wrong flyer. I think I got lazy and I didn't want to make a new flyer. But yeah, we do tech in a or maybe the whole thing isn't updated. But yeah, ours is like we have a bank of interview questions for different roles. So I literally just like filter for whatever role and whatever level someone is going for, and I could run those interviews. But thank you for that feedback because I don't think I've updated the image nor the um interview to say that we support all roles in tech. So got it. Awesome. But yeah, um, any other questions that people have about like interviewing or anything like that? All right. Well, I think this is a very like powerful mock interview that we went through today. I think we covered a lot of different things about like how to think about showing up in the interview and just different ways that you can tackle these questions. And I think each time I do one of these, we come to find out that it's not if the person is skilled enough, it's just like, do you know how to talk about your work? And so I hope with the more that we do these as a community, we all get better at talking about our impact and our work so that these interviews feel a little bit less scary the next time we go through them. All right. As always, you can reach me on Slack, and we can hang out there. But for now, we can go ahead and call it a day.
Okay. And when will I get the notes and the private recording?
You will get that as soon as I post it. It looks really
Okay.
ugly, but because I have a new setup and I forgot to update my OBS with all of the Tech by Choice different screens that we need. So yeah, it'll go up soon, but it'll definitely be private.
All right, thanks.
All right. Well, I hope everyone has a good rest of their day and weekend or night. And I'll see you in Slack.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys. Thank you.
you.
Bye.